The Man Who Devoured Himself. There's an ancient myth about a prince of Thessaly, Ariston, who chopped down all the trees in a sacred grove belonging to the goddess Demeter to build a banquet hall. In the story, Demeter took her revenge on Ariston by afflicting him with an insatiable hunger that he could never satisfy. Despite his daughter, Demeter, selling herself to passers-by for money to buy food for her ravenous father, Ariston died because his insatiable hunger drove him to devour his own limbs. Putting aside for a moment the grisly image of a man chewing off his arms and legs, there are at least two interpretations we can take from this story. The first is that if we have a relative bent on a path of destruction, whether that be through an addiction to drugs, alcohol or gambling, there's little we can do to stop them. Only they can control their appetites. And only they can summon the will to stop. As Chekhov wrote, there is no greater sorrow than to know another's secret when you cannot help them. As much as we may love them and want the best for them, the only person that can help them to put down that drink, fold that hand of cards or put down that needle full of drugs, is them. But, unlike Demeter who was blinded by her love, we know that the depth of our love is not expressed in enabling a loved one to continue down a destructive path. No, it is given its deepest expression in our courage to step back, and then to be there for them when they are ready to change. Second, you'd probably need to be the dumbest environmentalist on the planet to fail to see the usefulness of a story about a man who chops down all the trees and ends up destroying himself. Like Ariston, we are chopping down all the trees and polluting the planet. And like Ariston, our insatiable appetites will be our undoing. Even if you don't personally believe that carbon dioxide emitted from burning fossil fuels causes global warming, there are still plenty of sound reasons to wean ourselves off the black stuff and get human civilization out of the cradle and walking tall. At the very least, we'll probably prevent the needless death of thousands of birds, fish and other marine life which currently die because we can't seem to get the stuff out the ground without killing them. Whatever your view of man's impact on the environment, it's an undeniable fact that oil is a finite resource and will run out eventually. It seems only prudent, then, that we start investing in alternative sources of energy right now to head off any future conflicts over a diminishing resource. After all, if it's true that we're invading places like Iraq for the oil, then what's it going to be like decades from now when all the gas is burnt, and the oil wells have run dry? I doubt very much, given its willingness to blackmail Europe, Russia will be any less belligerent in the future, especially when the world's oil and gas supplies come under greater pressure from the demands of rising giants like China and India. Both of whom won't be squeamish about protecting their national interests, either. The dependency on fossil fuels, like the dependency individuals have on drugs and alcohol, is a powder keg ready to blow up in our faces. At the very least, you'd think kicking our habit would force the major energy suppliers to cut the prices they charge you for electricity and gas. I mean, can they really get away with charging us as much for our energy needs if the resource they use to generate that energy no longer needs to be transported hundreds of miles and is an abundant renewable resource right on our doorstep? Besides which, a dramatic reduction of our consumption of oil may force the petty tyrants of the Middle East and North Africa to reform their economies and to stop oppressing their own people, which can only be good, no. Of course, there is what you could call the John F. Kennedy argument. To coin the great man himself, we can choose to get off oil not because it is easy but because it is hard. After all, necessity is the mother of all invention, you know. Just as Kennedy made it a necessity to beat the Soviets in the space race, we can make it a necessity to get off our addiction to oil and launch the human race on a journey that's even greater than the one which got us to the moon. We could end up making many technological advances that benefit the whole of humankind, too. Besides, just like the fish in the sea, the birds in the sky and the trees in the forest, your nieces and nephews don't care how we manage to save the planet, just as long we do it. Yes, it's not hard to see how a life of pain and suffering draws some people into a life of addiction. And it's not hard to see how that same need to escape from suffering is mirrored in the wider world where we've become addicted to a consumer lifestyle underpinned by our dependence on oil. Like all addicts, we think we can stop like that. We'll get off the oil tomorrow, we tell ourselves. But like addicts the world over, we've been funding our addiction by piling up a debt that's payable, not by us, but by the children of the future. And while it's true the only person that can save an addict is themselves, we can all choose to do the hard thing, to save the planet, and in so doing save ourselves.